Chuck, I'm very sorry, but I have to save all my Pete Hegseth jokes for my video with Nikki later. I can't do this with you. I'm sorry. We could go so much fucking faster with them if they had the chips and we cooperated. But what everyone's afraid of is then they'll steal all our shit. They'll have better weapons than us. They'll be like, I got you, motherfuckers, and then they'll turn on us again. And we can't do that, right?
So I don't think the existence of some of these chips in China is an indication that this is an entirely ineffective policy. I think it just shows that it needs continued refinement.
They also need to keep us away so that they can basically strangle Taiwan. We essentially go into an AI dark age, right? Like, what are we gonna surface submarines and start shooting cruise missiles, killing Chinese boys? How's that gonna end? You know what I mean?
They're just, as you say, maybe gonna plunge us into an AI dark age.
Them? It's not us? We're not doing it?
It's sure either
takes two
way,
to
right?
tango.
It's both parties, yes, but I think what I don't want at this time is a TV host at the top of the DoD who has a commission to purge people who aren't wholly loyal to Donald Trump from the senior ranks of the U.S. military, ensuring that he only hears repeated back to him the things that he wants to do, right? That kind of an echo chamber with the worst leadership possible. I don't think that's a smart thing for us right now.
All right, Chuck. I will say about Pete Hegseth that if he wants to wash his hands of the leadership of the U.S. military, then go ahead and wash your hands.
I don't think anybody's washing their hands of the leadership of the U.S. military.
Hi, everybody. This is John back from Real Veteran News, here with my good old friend and fellow Army veteran, Charles Chuck Seal. How are you doing, Chuck?
I'm doing great. How are you, John?
Great weekend day, and we could talk about China and AI. Very interesting to me, so this is going to be a good video. Would you like to take a second to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, Army veteran, did intelligence and invaded Iraq and was back, after that a couple years later.
By yourself?
Moved into, yeah, exactly, by myself. As a part of the 3rd Infantry. And then I left the military and moved into the government, into the State Department, where I did cybersecurity for a number of years, and now I freelance consulting.
We're going to be talking today about technology topic, China, AI, rivalry competition, and the chips. And in case anybody forgot, I'm a data scientist. So in my second career here after being a Ranger when I was younger. So talking about AI and data science and everything. So you ready to get started?
Let's do it.
All right. Just to kind of frame it real quick before we get into the more news happenings and what's been happening lately. Obviously, we know that USA is the largest, most powerful country in the world. China is by far the second most largest, powerful country in the world. They have been trending up. They want to start competing with us. Ideally, both of us don't want to fight each other, but they definitely want to compete with us. And we also want to compete with them because we would like to keep what we have. But we've also been doing business together, and our supply chains are all mixed up, and their kids are in our schools, and our kids are in their schools. And, we got political language going on here, and they've got political language going on there. We've got a new president now and all this shit. So all this shit's going down. I will just recap the policy from the Biden administration on 2 types of chips. You have the AI chips and the cell phone chips. Both of them are important. About halfway through, started trying to restrict the Chinese ability to get these chips because they were just buying them. We were essentially handing them a loaded handgun and asking them to blow our brains out. And so Biden's Commerce Secretary was Gina Raimondo, and she had said a lot of very good things that made it seem like she understood that it was important and that she was the one who had to stop these sales. She took action. She talked a lot. There were some rules, but it seems as though the restrictions were not effective, and they've been getting the chips one way or another. They're hustling, and Gina they had draft regulations in the summer, and they never got put in. So my question is, what the fuck, Gina? You said all this stuff, and I understand maybe the election, or I don't know what she was doing or what was going on, but they should have kept the pressure on this and not let this slip so much. It's they understood that they needed to do something they did some, they were talking, and then there's some other considerations too. The Chinese have some advantages against us, and we're about to essentially get into this Mexican knife fight where we gut each other on these AI chips and the cell phone chips and everything. So what do you think about this situation, Chuck? And do you have anything to add on just the general situation?
Yeah, I think in terms of that general description you gave, I think it's really good. I think it's pretty spot on. But one thing that I would say is this is a complicated and complex issue. And so is preventing a country like China with an intelligence service like they have, the intelligence services that they have, from gaining access to these chips. It can take some time, right? It can take a little bit of time to figure out how they're getting things. They're going to try to work around that. They're going to try to get a hold of these. And sometimes they may, through covert means, be able to obtain some of these chips. I think the most important thing is stemming the flow of chips to them, keeping, right, if you're thinking strategically and trying to prevent them from progressing. Everyone you keep out of their hands is a net benefit to us. That said, I mean, obviously it needs continued improvement and refinement, but I think a process like this is not designed, in a realistic world, is not designed to work immediately on the spot. You're going to find places where things are getting through. There are criminals everywhere. There are intelligence operatives everywhere who are going to be willing to, for a price, help one another. And so stuff's is gonna get through. The question is then, how do you respond to that? How do you control that supply chain even better? So I don't think the existence of some of these chips in China is an indication that this is an entirely ineffective policy. I think it just shows that it needs continued refinement.
Yeah, obviously it needs work. And Trump's going to put someone new in there. Trump talks tough on China, and he's put some China hawks out there. Obviously, they're going to try to circumvent. Okay, let's start talking about the specifics here, okay? TSMC, which is the main Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation, I think. TSMC is the main company in Taiwan that makes these chips and makes the most advanced chips. And they also control factories in China and in the United States and elsewhere. Multinational corporation making these chips. Most important chip making company in the world. What happened was TSMC did a teardown of a Huawei chip, AI chip, and found one of their processors inside that chip. And so they were like, somehow these people got them. And they know that if the US found out, then we could protest and sue them essentially. So they preemptively alerted U.S. regulators and were like, hey, looks like they're getting these chips somehow. And it's like, we know this is happening. Gina knows it. Department of Commerce knows it. All these people know it. But they're not working hard enough or fast enough. And Chuck just said, we got to figure out what they're going to do or whatever. But like, we know what they're going to do. Like it's like a chess match, right? You get a red team, some smart people on one side, some smart people on the other, and you play the cat and mouse game. You're like, oh, they're going to rent them in the cloud. Oh, they're going to smuggle them through Singapore. They're going to smuggle them through Vietnam. Like, we know what the fuck they're going to do. All right. So it's like preemptively red team that shit, come up with a tighter strategy that's actually going to be effective. And they just throw some rule at this. Like, the Chinese aren't going to pay attention to this rule. They're just going to buy them. They're diverting them, right? So basically TSMC said, look, some of our chips are getting diverted. They probably have the serial numbers. They know where they're coming from. And so they stopped shipments to these other countries that are diverting chips to China, and they're trying to figure out what's going on.
So, I mean, I think, again, it kind of goes back to what I was saying. This is not going to be perfect. So the only perfect way to prevent this from happening, even in and of itself, it wouldn't be perfect, but one very strong way to prevent this from happening would be to move all production into the United States and not allow them to be exported from the United States at all. And they could only be used for military and government uses within the United States, right? And then the government maintains full physical control over these processors at all times. That's not realistic, but that would be the way to prevent China from getting their hands on them. If you're going to allow them to be used anywhere else, if they're going to exist elsewhere, if they're going to exist outside the United States, if we're going to share them with allies, China can possibly get their hands on some of these things. So I just feel like we have to level set.
Say 100% of chips come to the United States and then we send them, unless we stop Vietnam or Singapore. I mean, it'll just be one more stop on the diversion train. Like, they're going to end up in China one way or another. They'll put them on the back of a donkey cart if they have to. You know what I mean? Like,
I think that's what I'm saying. What we're doing is increasing the complexity and the cost for China of getting these. It also means they're probably getting less than they would want to get. I think that in and of itself is a win. It may be next to impossible to prevent China from getting 100% of the chips, right? They may get some of the chips. I'm not saying that that's a good thing, but I'm saying it's just we have to live in the world we live in. And I don't think that this is an indication, the fact that they've discovered that China is using some chips, has gotten some chips. I don't think that's necessarily a huge failure on the part of the Department of Commerce in this, or the U.S. government writ large, right? This could be a broadly successful program that does have some holes, because there are going to be some holes. They are an actor in this, right? And they have the ability to operate, and they want these very much.
I also want to say some context around what will happen if this works or if it doesn't work, right? It might be something in the middle, like they get some chips, they don't get some chips, whatever. But if we can manage to stop them from the cell phone chips and the AI chips, or one or the other or whatever, the cell phone chips are necessary for Huawei to stay competitive in the global marketplace. Huawei is like their Verizon. It's their biggest telecommunication company. And the only way that they can really hang is if they sell their stuff outside China. They'll just be like a second-rate telecommunications supplier in China. Shitty cell phones, everyone make fun of them. That's not what they want, right? They want Huawei to be like a world-class company that they can be proud of, that has good chips, better than Apple, better than all this other shit. That's what they want. So if they can't get these chips, there's no way they can do that, all right? With the AI, if they can't get enough AI processors, like you just saw Elon Musk created the largest AI center in Texas or wherever it was. I mean, the more chips that you have, the bigger AI models, like the Llama models and the Meta and these big open source LLM models, the bigger, the better, the faster you can train them, progress will be faster, right? So our AI development will just be outpacing theirs, because they're going to be like choked by not having enough chips. Like they'll have to allocate them between their big companies and their startups, and the startups won't get them, or the startups will have slower chips. They, in the long run, will be fucked if they can't figure this out. And then if we can't figure it out, then their AI progress continues unabated. They have more engineers than us. They're people you generally will work for less money. They've got a lot of advantages. They have state control of the economy. They can pour money into whatever they want. And what could happen is we could send them all these AI chips one way or another. They get them, and they start to outpace us. And then the civilian and well as the military, so their businesses will start doing better than our businesses, and their military will have better AI than our military eventually. And then we're really fucked.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, what do I think about those scenarios? I think I don't like the second scenario. I think that the U.S. should certainly try all that we can to move faster than China on this and maintain the superiority that we have today. I think what we do need to continue to do, refine and advance, is a strategy to keep as many of these out of the hands of China as possible, right? The more that we are able to take advantage of these tools and grow our program, the better it is for us with respect to that battle. And I think Trump has certainly had harsh rhetoric related to China, slapping tariffs, etc. I haven't heard a lot out of Trump about this issue. I haven't heard a lot out of Trump even about understanding this issue, right? Let alone trying to tackle this one with China. And he does seem to me to be a little more focused on domestic issues. And that is a concern for me, right? And I think at a time when we have this strategic problem, we have a lot of strategic technological issues with the military. I see Trump, appointing a TV host who has no experience leading a large organization and seems almost entirely focused on building a strong force by wiping out woke mind ideology in the military, instead of really building a fighting force that integrates technology, reaches out across the, U.S. technological sectors in order to create a lean and technological fighting force that's capable of moving us from, through the 21st century and even into the 22nd century. And that's not what I'm hearing. So I have concerns about whether we're going to have a focus on this stuff or not. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But I do think that, the appointments that I'm seeing so far don't indicate to me that Trump is looking at these big strategic issues. He seems to be focused inside on consolidating his own power and working on domestic issues.
So China knew this was coming, obviously, because they all went to our graduate schools and we trained them. And they've been able to out-strategize us for the last 20 years, right? So they have proceeded to destroy their environment by becoming the world's leader in rare earth mineral production. Last year, they made major restrictions in the export of rare earth minerals during the Biden administration in response to the CHIPS stuff. And then just recently, they tightened up. They've been executing and consolidating their rare earth minerals industry so that they can really clamp down and try to bargain with us. It's kind of like when Ukraine invaded that little piece of Russian Kursk because they thought that they were going to have a bargaining chip against all the land that Putin took from them. They think, okay, well, we'll give you the minerals, but we can get the minerals other ways. They can't get the chips without us. We're in a better position. All of the chip companies and everyone that needs these minerals saw this coming. They have several years of stockpiles. Prices are going up, but not astronomical. What they're saying is if we needed these minerals, some of these minerals, we could essentially spin it up, but they're waiting to gouge us, right? Like once they're not going to start making them here or in our allied countries now. They're going to wait until the Chinese turn off the spigot, and then they're going to gouge the fuck out of the U.S. government because they know they can bend the government over and just take whatever they want. And so we'll be paying, $100 a pound, $1,000 a pound. And then all of our AI chips and everything are going to cost like an arm and a leg. And that's exactly what China wants. But then these guys that actually do this stuff on our side are going to be making tons of money. And they're not doing anything prophylactically to help us before that situation happens. What do you think about the rare earth minerals?
Well, I think this fits into the sort of mold that China has taken, the model that China has used for a long time related to resources, right? China has been really good at internally controlling their resources and the flow of that stuff in and out of the country. And also, China is particularly good and effective at building those relationships, economic relationships with countries overseas that also have the resources that they need to do business, or the resources that we want to do business to build stuff like this. China's been really good in places like Asia and Africa and South America at building those economic relationships, enabled them to better control our access to those kinds of raw materials. And the only thing I would say about the comments that you made is, China's not able to make these chips now. That doesn't mean that it will change. Then there's really nothing we can do about that, right? Except for some kind of other intervention.
They can make less advanced chips, but they're never going to be able to catch up to the most advanced tech. We also can't either, except the Taiwanese are theoretically our friends. I mean, they weren't there in Iraq with us. I mean, but they're our friends because, we're the bulwark against China, which is going to swallow them whole. And they've been planning this for a long time. I mean, obviously they've been planning to exploit us and to hoard this chip technology, which they knew was going to become more and more important. They knew this rise of China was coming. Eventually China was going to want them. They were going to need us to protect them. And they've created this situation and we talk about at the end, where it's putting these two countries at each other over stuff that, I mean, I understand why they want Taiwan. I do not understand why we give a fuck. You know what I mean? I don't know. We'll talk about it at the end, I guess. Just go over some specifics of what they're doing. And on October 1st, they made a new rule. So anytime these minerals are going out of the country, they need to submit detailed plans of how these minerals are going to be used in foreign supply chains. Basically, is this going to their military or whatever? They have 3 state-owned rare earth mineral companies, and the 2 foreign ones are being acquired by state entities. So essentially, they're privatizing their entire industry. They put new restrictions on antimony September 15th. Last year, they put restrictions on gallium and germanium. And there's this other mineral called dysprosium, which I hadn't heard of before, which goes for $100 a pound. And there's only one refinery in the world, which is near Shanghai, makes 99% of it. And NVIDIA wants to use this for AI chips. It's very important. And it involves a 100-step chemical process in order to refine it. We have a huge problem here where they control these minerals. We have to create them ourselves, or... Yeah,
they have control of most of the raw materials. And probably we seem to have much more control over the final products right now, right? And we're both trying to pull those levers as much as we can to impact the other's ability to...
go into this Taiwan national political strategy, national economic, political economic strategy, whatever, that they instituted generations ago to take over this chip making. The most advanced tech that they have are the 2 nanometer chips, the thinnest, most advanced chips. These are going to go into cell phones. Essentially, this is the crown jewels of Taiwan. And what they're saying by law and regulation, they will not let this shit out of the country. 7 nanometer and up, they'll let the Americans do that, or they'll do it in Germany or wherever. But these top chips and the people that they need, the PhDs, the electrical engineers, all this stuff, they're all staying in Taiwan. That's where they're putting their flag in the ground. They're saying core technology stays in Taiwan. That sets up this situation where the Chinese are going to want to take that island and the factories. we don't care about the island. Obviously, we care about the factories, but we can't move the factories because they won't let us move the factories. And then we have to bomb the factories or something. The Taiwanese will probably bomb the factories for us and everything. And then you have all the engineers and shit. They'll probably flee to Europe and the United States or whatever. But we won't be able to put Humpty Dumpty back together again fast enough for the global economy to not grind to a halt, because all the automobiles, all the dishwashers, fucking everything, everybody's job, everything. Inflation is going to go crazy. Prices are going to go crazy. The stock market, corporations are going to, everything's going to be affected by this. Everything's going to be fucked up, and everyone's going to be unhappy unless we figure out a way to not fight them over Taiwan.
I mean, I think that's a huge incentive for both parties, right? It's not just that the U.S. is unable to access that by moving the factories, but most assessments indicate that if China were to try to take Taiwan, even if they were successful, they would not be the recipient of just like working technology, sort of like you said, right? Working technologies, working factories with employees who are willing to work for them. So it's not like they would be able to spin this stuff up right away. Maybe over time they would be able to rebuild the capacity to build these advanced chips. So it's not good for anybody. And the huge global financial fallout is something that would be borne across the world. It would impact us. It would impact the Chinese as well. And I think that's a huge disincentive to any kind of drastic action, right? Like, to pay that price, things have to get considerably worse. The situation on the ground has to change dramatically to make that a worthwhile, investment, essentially, from the Chinese perspective. But again, part of this goes back to what I think the U.S., I think, is a mistake on the part of the U.S. over many years, which is giving away a lot of the government, stepping away from a lot of this advanced research. In so many cases now, the U.S. instead relies on, the private sector without government funding in the way that we used to provide to build out these capacities. Like, we are in space now. Elon Musk has a space company. Multiple people have space companies because the U.S. did the investment, paid the money, did the things necessary to come up with this hugely transformational but extremely challenging technologies. And then that stuff has rippled out into a variety of other industries. And that huge initial investment that is kind of a hurdle that's too hard to cross for many. Now those technologies exist and they can be passed down to the private sector. And we find the U.S. government used to have all of this expertise. The U.S. government invented the internet, right? These are like things that come out of projects that the U.S. government had because of government applications, military applications. To a large extent, that's not the business we're in anymore. We work with the private sector, and a lot of it is expecting them to do this stuff. I think if we were a little bit more focused on, again, working with, the private sector, but universities, et cetera, and really trying to centralize some of the control and provide investment for this, understanding that there's not a huge return on some of these technologies in the early phases, but over the long term, they bring huge economic benefits. The internet is an exceptional example of a program that, spearheaded by the U.S. government, probably was not viewed as having much financial return, but no one could imagine something providing the kind of return that the internet has had.
I like to talk about the conflict at the end. I mean, the chips are important. That leads to economic. Whoever has the best AI is going to dominate on economics, business, and they're also going to dominate militarily. Just 1% better, you win. All right. The way I see it, there's a couple different possible outcomes here. We go into this fight, the factories get destroyed, the supply chain gets disrupted, all these engineers get killed or traumatized or scattered all over the fucking place, whatever. We essentially go into an AI dark age, right? Like, the pace of AI development in the world right now is going about as fast as it can. The only thing limiting it is the pace at which these people can make these fucking chips. This one company. The more chips, the better, right? Like, they're selling out like hotcakes. And so anything that disrupts that is going to cause big problems. Not to mention the less important chips that go in cars and everything. That's going to be a big problem too. So what would happen is we'd have this like trajectory of AI development, this war between US and China, Taiwan gets plastered, and then we dip back down until someone figures out how to make AI chips, and then we start going back up again. When at the whole time, we could be going up on this AI development trajectory. And if we cooperated with the Chinese and didn't fight them, and our engineers work with their engineers and we all work together, we could inflect the trajectory of AI for all of humanity we could go so much fucking faster with them if they had the chips and we cooperated. But what everyone's afraid of is then they'll steal all our shit. They'll have better weapons than us. They'll be like, haha, I got you, motherfuckers, and then they'll turn on us again. And we can't do that, right? And then So we're probably not going to do that either. So we could have the golden age, we could have a dark age, but what's probably going to happen is they know that it's going to be very hard for them to do like a naval invasion, an invasion. They can surround Taiwan, do a naval blockade. It's in their backyard. Very easy for them to do. They can fly planes over Taiwan all day long. But when they start sending soldiers onto the beaches, it's going to be tough. They also need to keep us away so that they can basically strangle Taiwan. And they also want to keep the factories. So they want to basically gunboat diplomacy, negotiate something with the Taiwanese without us, keep us at bay with their long-range hypersonic missiles because our aircraft carriers won't be able to get close enough. We'll have our submarines, but what are we going to like surface submarines and start shooting cruise missiles, killing Chinese boys? How's that going to end? You know what I mean? So then we get into this stalemate where their boats surround Taiwan, their planes are going over Taiwan. The Taiwanese don't really want to cooperate, and they're going to hold out. And the only option we have is like a Berlin airlift to fly our planes in under U.S. military escort, load the chips on the plane, and then fly the plane out. And if we decide have to do that, but then all it's going to take is one accident. Their planes shoot our planes shoot their plane, and then then we're in this war. And how long can this like stalemate, this blockade thing go on for before something goes down, right? And then we get into the dark ages. What do you think about an AI golden age versus AI dark age?
I think that the price for all the actions you're talking about is probably a bit too high for anybody to be willing to pay it right now. I don't see the Chinese taking those actions right now. Maybe I'm wrong, right? But I think the cost to them, both economically and geopolitically, are tremendous. Like we talked about, without very much actual gain on the other side, because they're not just going to pick up these factories, right? They're just, as you say, maybe going to plunge us into an AI dark age.
Them? It's not us? Like, we're not doing it?
It's sure either
takes
way,
two to
right?
tango.
It's both parties, yes, but I think if one party is the party who cuts off access to these chips and destroys the industry, then I would say that they're the ones plunging the world into.
From their perspective, we're cutting them off. They were buying them fair and square up until Biden.
Sure, but again, I also, like I said, I don't think that any of these are reasonable outcomes right now. That said, sure, maybe it is a reasonable outcome right now. Maybe the Chinese are going to do this. I will tell you what I don't want to happen. I don't want Trump to be sitting there with his cabinet and turn to a former TV host to ask him what he thinks we should do in this situation. So I do think we should take some of these things more seriously. Like what the military normally does, as you're saying, is take all of these threats very seriously and do real and full planning for them and think about who we need to have in place for various things. And so, again, to hammer home my displeasure with unserious nature of the choices in the Trump cabinet. Last person I want dealing with this is former Fox News TV host.
Chuck, I'm very sorry, but I have to save all my Pete Hegseth jokes for my video with Nikki later. I can't do this with you. I'm sorry. I'm serious. I'm gonna kill him later. All right. Okay, cool. All right. Well, if you want to say anything final, but like for me personally, obviously I don't want to fight a war with them. I think we need to do some kind of non-aggression pact with them, negotiate some kind of resolution over the Taiwan thing. We need to share the chips. Like they want the fucking chips. Like we need the minerals. Our scientists need to work together. This is fucking stupid. We all, you know what I mean? Like we're gonna fight each other. We need to get all of us onto the next planet, and we need to get ready for these aliens. You know what I mean? Because their tech, they don't give a fuck about these AI chips. They got shit that we don't even know about. So we got to get our shit together. And we need the Chinese, and we need to not be fighting them.
Specific to what you just said, on the first instance, we need to leave the planet. I think there's value in that. I also think we're sort of destroying this one. But we do have the option of not destroying this one instead. And then in terms of aliens, again, I don't think everybody's sold on that. I'm certainly not sold on that. So on those two counts, I'm not sure that that's the reason. I would also say that, again, like in terms of AI, I don't think that it is probably like there are a lot of people who are very worried about the advancement of AI, right? And who are saying we should move slower, not faster. And so I'm not sure that we need to be barreling forward at all costs on AI. I'm not convinced that that's the solution either. And then with respect to working together with the Chinese on all these issues, again, I am all for cooperation, frankly. And I think working with the Chinese on every front that we can is better overall. 100% agree with that approach. Talking and working together is always better. That said, I will say over time, the Chinese have demonstrated an inability to be a trusted partner on a lot of these things. The Chinese have stolen gobs and gobs of technology from us and the rest of the world. And so it's hard to believe that we can trust them to be a fair broker and work with us on this issue when they haven't been able to do it with so many other critical issues like this in the past. But as I said, I'm not sure that we need to be barreling forward on this. I think that it's important. I think it's a huge leap forward. I find it really fascinating and interesting. I don't think that there's an imperative for us to get this all in place as quickly as possible before we understand it. I'm not convinced that partnering with China for that and a variety of other reasons that I outlined, right, is necessarily the most effective strategy to move this forward. What I don't want at this time is a TV host at the top of the DoD who has a commission to purge people who aren't wholly loyal to Donald Trump from the senior ranks of the U.S. military, ensuring that he only hears repeated back to him the things that he wants to do, right? Like that kind of an echo chamber with the worst leadership possible. I don't think that's a smart thing for us right now.
All right, Chuck. I will say about Pete Hegseth that if he wants to wash his hands of the leadership of the U.S. military, then go ahead and wash your hands.
I don't think anybody's washing their hands of the leadership of the U.S. military. I think what we need is a real leader who has run a large organization, who has demonstrated capability to deal with this stuff. And I think we need the military force that exists now being led by people who have experience.
Chuck, what if I told you that Pete doesn't wash his hands and hasn't washed his hands in 10 years?
As I told you, my 2019 resolution is to say things on air that I say off air. I don't think I've washed my hands for 10 years. Really, I don't really wash my hands ever.
Help me.
No, I inoculate myself. It's just not, germs are not a real thing. I can't see them, therefore they're not real.
So you're becoming immune?
Oh, is that what you're going with it? Well, then I would say that's another reason. So on top of being unqualified, he's disgusting. Filthy. That's gross. That's gross.
Live reaction. I love how you didn't know about it before.
No, I haven't heard about that at all. Also,
how could you not hear about that?
That period spans COVID. Well, I guess I'm not down in these little I don't know. Listen, that period spans COVID too. You're telling me during COVID, this man never washed his hands? Listen, in addition to being disgusting, it speaks broadly to his general judgment and his ability to analyze threats in the world and maturity. And then he's telling people about it, I guess, which makes it even worse.
On TV!
Doesn't make it worse? I don't know.
It was on TV.
Yeah. Okay, well.
Okay, we probably need to wrap it. Interesting discussion. Got more interesting at the end. Thank you, Chuck. It was fun. We'll find another good topic soon, all right? So
yeah,
thanks for coming.
Always a good time. Thanks, John.
Real Veteran News. Thanks for watching. Bye.